Hello and welcome to Miss Hannah Loves Grammar. In this video we'll be sharing some quick-fire notes on Stave 2 of A Christmas Carol by Charles Dickens. We'll be concentrating on not just what happens in this stave, but the language that Dickens uses to identify the key themes and ideas we should remember from this stave, alongside understanding what our key takeaways are as readers of this stave. So the stave begins by Scrooge waking up and waiting for the clock to chime once, which means the arrival of the first ghost, as Marley said at the end of Stave 1. So it's interesting, the ghost of Christmas past looks simultaneously old and young. So they look young because their face is not wrinkled, but they have long white hair, suggesting that they are old. The ghost of Christmas past holds a branch of holly, and for Victorian readers, this would have made a lot of sense. They study something called floriography, which is the symbolism and the study of what flowers can represent. And holly would have represented this idea of forgiving the past, and the idea that holly is more than associated with winter, it's associated with forgetting what has happened. It makes sense that the ghost of Christmas past would be holding holly, therefore, because they are taking Scrooge back to their past. And it's interesting to note that the ghost of Christmas past also has a light coming from their head. Scrooge wants him to wear a hat, and a cap, in fact, straight away, because the light is very glaring and it's night time, he's just woken up. But the ghost of Christmas past claims he is here for Scrooge's welfare, and that's the most important thing. The ghost makes Scrooge revisit quite an unhappy and traumatic childhood. We see his sister pick him up from school, because it would seem that his father had chosen not to pick him up from boarding school. And we understand that his sister cared for him. It's interesting because we're forced to consider, well, why then is he not so kind to her son, Fred, who we already saw him interact with in Stave 1? We then see Scrooge visit Fezziwig, his first boss, at the staff Christmas party. He's wowed by Fezziwig, and he realises that money does not really lead to fulfilment and happiness. And actually, Fezziwig as a boss is a good example for Scrooge of how he should probably treat his own employee, Bob Cratchit, more kindly than he chooses to. Scrooge visits his younger self, as we've already considered, but he also visits his young man self when he's engaged to Belle. Now, Belle actually breaks off the engagement to Scrooge, as she realises he loves money too much, and Scrooge is then forced to see that she's married again, has a happy life elsewhere. Scrooge is really traumatised from seeing this stuff, and it pushes the ghost to a new level of power. We know that the ghost has impact, but Scrooge pushes the ghost's cap to hide the light at this point. He's been frustrated by the light for a while, and now he does it. Scrooge, traumatised and now left alone, returns to his bedroom and falls asleep. So that was the action that happened, but what does Dickens do with language in this stave to create a sense that we should care about what is happening? The first moment where we care is shown when we're first taken back to Scrooge's childhood. There, we begin to have sympathy for the young Scrooge. And it's interesting that the narrator takes over the description of Scrooge's reaction to reliving being left at boarding school at Christmas time. Scrooge said he knew it, and he sobbed. It's quite powerful when a grown person sobs. The verb is wrenching for us as readers. It's an overwhelming reaction to having to relive rejection. But the narrator takes over again in the opening description of a lonely boy who was reading near a feeble fire. The adjectives lonely and feeble accentuate this idea that the little boy is vulnerable and needs our sympathy because they're alone in the cold. And specifically, we are never told that it's Scrooge. And that definitely helps us feel more sympathetic when we realise that this young boy on his own is Scrooge. We have to work that out. And it's sad. In contrast, that is, to the description of Fezziwig, who we meet later on, and we realise is a very important influence on the young Scrooge. He's described in hugely optimistic terms as comfortable, oily, fat and jovial. It suggests that he lives the good life. He indulges in great food, he's funny, he laughed all over himself is a moment that's described. His agility is recalled. This description reflects his personality of being someone who's upbeat and full of joy and living life comfortably, living life in a way that welcomes people. He is a character that upon revisiting, Scrooge realises he should mirror. The most important moment in this stave is the change of heart. When the ghost of Christmas past plays around with Scrooge and says, yeah, it's a small matter to make these silly folks so full of gratitude. The ghost is implying that people are stupid and can be fickle, but Scrooge defends Fezziwig and his character. He accepts that it's not money that makes people feel valued, but offering thanks to them. That's a direct contrast to how he's treated Bob Cratchit in Stave 1. The overwhelming realisation that Scrooge has across this stave is that his greed has got him nowhere. He's depicted as full of avarice in this stave. That's a love and greed for money. He has to choose money over Belle. We're depicting her as the love of his life. The description of him being eager, greedy, restless in motion in the eye, which showed the passion that had taken root, is deeply dark and ominous. It sounds like an addiction, it's an all-consuming fixation. But when Belle, his former love, says to him, your master passion, gain, she feels like his nobler aspirations have been shaken off. She's disappointed. Scrooge has to relive her being married with a family, whilst he is quite alone in the world. He realises he has lost because of his love for money. So what are the takeaways from Stave 2? Yes, Scrooge did have a tough childhood. He was close to his sister. We wonder why he doesn't care more for Fred. Fezziwig was a great boss, and Scrooge realises he should be mirroring Fezziwig's kindness more to Bob. Scrooge realises also that avarice has cost him love and perspective on the people in his life that he should care more about. Why not subscribe to Miss Hannah Loves Grammar for all things English, literary and grammatical?